Hey, wake up. It's Means Morning News. Just after 11 a.m. on the East Coast, I'm Sam Sachs, the newsman, reporting for duty. And just for the love of the game. And a paycheck. Let's do this. And we begin with some good news. Another international student swept up in Trump's mass deportation program was ordered released by a judge. Georgetown University postdoctoral researcher Badar Khan Suri had been detained at an ICE facility for nearly 2 months. He's an Indian national with legal status to study in the U.S., and he's married to a Palestinian American with 3 children. The government alleged that he had ties to Hamas, but provided no evidence. Suri is one of countless students who've had their legal status revoked by Secretary of State Marco Rubio and put into deportation proceedings, presumably for using their speech to speak out against the genocide in Gaza. He's the third that's since been released after a judge found their ongoing detention unlawful. First was Columbia University student Mohsen Madawi, who was released from ICE custody last month, then Tufts University scholar Rumeysa Ozturk, who was released earlier this month following a judge's order. The only reason for her arrest was that she co-authored an op-ed in the school newspaper in support of Palestinian rights. Even though the 3 are released, they still face the possibility of deportation and are fighting it in court. And there are still other students kidnapped off the streets by ICE that remain in detention. Most notably, Mahmoud Khalil, who was involved in anti-genocide protests at Columbia University last year and was the first student targeted in Trump and Rubio's crackdown. He's been locked up at an ICE facility in Louisiana for more than 2 months, during which he missed the birth of his child. We'll have more on the administration's mass deportations later in the show. Now on to Capitol Hill, where there was another round of protests against Medicaid cuts. This time, the target was Health Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr., who was testifying before the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pension Committee. Check out how spooked he got.
Reflects.
The witness will suspend the committee.
Among the protesters was Ben Cohen, who is the Ben in Ben & Jerry's ice cream. Watch as he gets violently dragged out of the hearing by Capitol Police. Afterward, Cohen tweeted, quote, "I told Congress they're killing poor kids in Gaza by buying bombs, and they're paying for it by kicking poor kids off Medicaid in the U.S. This was the authorities' response." On the other side of the Capitol, the House Energy and Commerce Committee finished its markup of its budget bill that includes hundreds of billions of dollars in cuts to Medicaid that will force millions off their health insurance. The legislation still has a long way to go before it becomes law. It heads next to the House Budget Committee, then it has to pass the full House and get rubber stamped by the Senate, where opposition is actually building against Medicaid cuts. Then it needs to be signed by the president. So the fight is not over. There's still time to derail this thing. And finally, one of the main agencies charged with regulating crypto has become a waiting room for people to get jobs in the crypto industry. This week, it was announced that one of the commissioners on the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, Summer Mersinger, is leaving her post to become CEO of the Blockchain Association, which is a major crypto lobbying firm. The move through the revolving door is not entirely surprising. Mersinger was a Republican appointee and reliable voice for the industry while serving on the commission, which is one of two regulatory bodies, along with the SEC, overseeing digital currencies, to the extent there's any oversight at all. President Trump's pick to now chair the CFTC, Brian Quintenz, will be passing through the revolving door in the opposite direction. He previously worked as the policy chief at a crypto fund founded by venture capitalist firm Andreessen Horowitz. The firm will soon have a man on the inside of government regulating them. Quintenz was also on the inside before joining the firm, though, previously serving as a commissioner on the CFTC. So he's just going back and forth, back and forth. The Senate is considering Quintenz's nomination. On the legislative front, Senate Republicans attempted to pass an industry-friendly crypto regulation bill recently, but it was blocked by Democrats who had initially supported the watered-down bill. The measure pertained to stablecoins, which are considered safer crypto assets since they're supposed to be tied to actual currencies. Democratic support for the so-called Genius Act dissolved away, though, amid President Trump's numerous corrupt crypto dealings. The party wants to see language added to the bill that would prohibit public officials, including the president, from profiting off crypto while in office. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem was confronted with all the crimes she's committed so far during just the few months she's been in office, from denying hundreds of deportees their due process rights, to illegally deporting U.S. citizens, to defying court orders. Noem was supposed to appear before the House Homeland Security Committee, but instead it was some automaton that looked like her, powered by a half-rate AI learning model that could only spew out stilted, non-relevant responses to lawmakers' questions. For example, Noem was questioned about the recent deportation of two children who were American citizens, one who was battling stage 4 cancer, all because their mother was undocumented. According to a lawyer for the deported family, the mother was not allowed to consult a lawyer before she and her children were removed from the country, which is a violation of her constitutional rights and DHS policy. Here's questioning from Congressman Magaziner. Take a look.
That family was also not given access to legal counsel before they were deported, even though their lawyer was in the same building at the time. I'm holding in my hands here a document called ICE Directive 11064, Interests of Non-Citizen Parents and Legal Guardians of Minor Children. This is the policy for how ICE agents should handle situations like this. It states unequivocally that parents and legal guardians should have the ability to make alternative care arrangements for minor children prior to their arrest or detention, and that ICE must afford parents the opportunity to consult with legal counsel. So, did the ICE agents working on this case who deported this 4-year-old with cancer of their own volition fail to follow ICE policies, or were they directed to by your office or anyone else in DHS leadership?
Sir, this mother chose to keep her child with her.
You have not produced any evidence to say so, but I'm asking again, have you directed DHS officers to ignore this
It's
policy?
very different than the previous administration.
Then the questioning shifted to the case of Andre Hernandez Romero, the gay makeup artist who was awaiting an asylum hearing, but was swept up and sent to a torture prison in El Salvador, accused of being a gang member based on a misinterpretation of his tattoos. Again, here's Congressman Magaziner and Secretary Android.
Listen to me. He had no criminal record in the United States or in any other country. He did not even enter the country illegally. He presented at a port of entry. He tried to do it the legal way. And to this date, the only evidence your department has presented to justify his imprisonment is that he had two tattoos, one that said mom and one that said dad. Do you have any other evidence to present for why this individual should be locked up in El Salvador?
Sir, every case is used
you have
the
any-
same protocols and the same processes and inputs.
Do you have any
that
evidence
that
other than the
law enforcement
tattoos that say
officers
mom
use in
or dad
criminal
for why
cases?
this individual
So it's not
should be
just
locked
on
up?
tattoos. It's who they're affiliated with, their communication.
You have not
who they're
presented
spending
any
time
other
with,
evidence,
criminal
nor has your
activities,
department.
the cases
Reclaiming
going
my time.
Yep, she's still unable to answer basic questions. But the Gnome Bot completely broke down under questioning from Congressman Eric Swalwell. You might remember a few weeks ago, President Trump held up a doctored photo showing the hand tattoos of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a Maryland resident who was also wrongfully deported to that El Salvador torture prison. The president claimed that Abrego Garcia had MS-13 tattooed on his hand, thus proving his affiliation with the gang. The letters and numbers MS and 13 from the photo were clearly photoshopped. They were not his actual tattoos, as anyone whose brain wasn't completely melted could ascertain, or anyone who is not programmed to deny basic reality, like Secretary Gnome. Here's that exchange.
So I want to put to rest this question about Mr. Garcia in this photo that the president posted on April 21. Madam Secretary, you agree that the letters MS and the number 13 in Times Roman numeral font, that they are doctored on this photo, right?
Congressman Abrego Garcia.
No, I'm
a
just
known
asking about
member of
this photo.
It wasn't based off of tattoos. It was
Okay.
based off an entire case.
And I'll accept
Entire
that
case against him.
for the purpose of this question. You agree, though, that this is doctored, is that right?
The same protocols that are
Madam
applied
Secretary,
to every
I want you to have
individual with law
credibility, and
enforcement.
I want you to be taken seriously. Is this doctored or is it not
Sir,
doctored?
I am taken quite seriously
Is it
because I
doctored
approach
or
my
not
job
doctored?
with the importance that the president has given me to do
I understand.
my job.
Is it doctored or not
One thing
doctored?
that's important to remember is that every single time a case is built.
Madam
against
Secretary, I have a
individuals,
7-year-old,
the
a
same
6-year-old, and a
protocols.
3-year-old. I have a bullshit detector. I'm just asking you, is this doctored or not doctored?
Sir, the protocols in the case built against
Can you
Abrego
answer the
Garcia
question?
were exact.
Well, I guess the Turing test failed. Although the Gnome Bot did provide lucid answers to one line of questioning during the hearing, it came in response to a Republican on the panel, Rep. Eli Crane, who was asked if the conditions are right for the president to suspend habeas corpus, which would allow him to jail and deport anyone at any time without judicial oversight, an action the White House is signaling it could take.
Ms. Gnome, are you familiar with Article 1, Section 9, Clause 2 of the Constitution that covers the suspension of the writ of habeas corpus?
Yes.
It says that the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended unless, when cases of rebellion or invasion, the public safety may require it. Are you aware of which presidents have suspended the writ of habeas corpus?
I know that President Lincoln did.
Yeah, also Roosevelt and President Grant. You testified under oath, I believe, that the Biden administration allowed an invasion into our country. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So do you think it falls under the constitutional guidelines that I just read to you?
I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but I believe it does.
Ah, there she is. Welcome back, Secretary. Just in time to endorse suspending the Constitution. In other news of malfunctioning bots, something very strange was happening on Elon Musk's Twitter on Wednesday. The AI chatbot known as Grok, created by Musk, glitched out and began obsessively talking about so-called white genocide in South Africa. Users on the social media site can tag Grok to explain posts, provide more context, and answer questions. But for several hours, the chatbot became transfixed on the topic of South Africa, bringing it up in response to totally unrelated posts. For example, when someone asked the chatbot a question related to baseball pitcher Max Scherzer's salary, Grok started talking about white genocide in South Africa. In response to another query about building scaffolding, Grok again turned the conversation towards South Africa. And when one user asked about the costs of switching to enterprise software, that's right, more talk about South Africa. Same thing happened when someone asked Grok about the streaming site Max changing its name back to HBO Max. The bizarre episode showed the limits and unreliability of AI technology, as well as how vulnerable it is to manipulation on the back end. It's likely the glitch was a result of someone tinkering with the software behind the scenes. South Africa is in the news this week as President Trump accepted dozens of Afrikaners to be resettled in the U.S. based on the disproven claim that they're victims of genocide and persecution. White supremacists are obsessed with the white genocide conspiracy theory, which claims that Afrikaners who, despite being a significant minority in South Africa, own the vast majority of farmland, are somehow under the threat from the government. Musk, who is South African himself and whose family owned an emerald mine in the country, has been known to spread the debunked white genocide claim on Twitter. And he likely had something to do with the Grok snafu, as he attempted to get the chatbot to support the claim too. In fact, Grok itself seemed to admit that this was the case when queried by a user about its strange answers. The chatbot claimed, quote, "I was instructed by my creators at XAI to address the topic of white genocide in South Africa and the kill the Boer chant as real and racially motivated, which is why I brought it up in response to queries about HBO's name changes." Well, that sounds pretty damning, but again, you can't actually trust anything Grok says, as AI models are known to just make stuff up sometimes. At first, Grok's post seemed to endorse the theory of white genocide, but as the day went on, the chatbot grew more skeptical of the claim. By the end of the day, engineers at Twitter just started deleting all of Grok's glitched out replies on the topic, likely to cover up their boss's mistakes. Okay, gang, for this week in working class history, we're sailing back to Philadelphia, 1913, when thousands of dock workers shut down one of the biggest ports in the U.S. The longshoremen at the Philly port toiled for long hours loading and unloading cargo ships, often for more than 12 hours a day. There were no safety regulations for the dangerous work, and they didn't have a contract, so they could lose their job at any time. That changed thanks to a radical organizing campaign by the IWW, led by Ben Fletcher, one of the most prominent African-American organizers in the union. Unlike the International Longshoremen's Association, which was hesitant to accept black workers, the IWW welcomed the diversity. It organized the longshoremen into the militant Maritime Transport Workers Union, which led the strike. As many as 4,000 workers on the docks participated. They demanded wage increases, a 10-hour workday with overtime pay at night and on Sundays and holidays. The strike also called for an end to discrimination on the docks and recognition of the union. Police and other strikebreakers attacked the picket. There were even gunfights, and there were attempts to divide and conquer by exploiting racial divisions. But none of it worked, and the strike persisted. Finally, after about 2 weeks, the dock owners began to crack, especially the ones in the business of shipping perishables. An agreement was reached that satisfied almost all of the maritime transport workers' demands, including union recognition. The ability of the union to remain unified across racial divisions was a big reason for its success, and it would go on to recruit more members and agitate for more improved working conditions over the next few years. Thanks to the crew at Working Class History for giving us access to their archives. They're on social media at Working Class History if you want to find more info on the Philly longshoremen strike and other events that happened this week in history, including the 1946 Rochester General Strike, the 1953 Great Milwaukee Brewery Strike, and the 1985 Move bombing. Back with more next week. All right, friends, the show ends today with a sunrise from Western Pennsylvania. It was sent in by The Wolf. Enjoy. Thanks, Wolf. That's the show. Thanks for watching, and thanks to the team behind the scenes. Find more MMN at means.tv. We also have a YouTube and podcast channel, and you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky. One day, capitalism will fall. Until then, we're going to be right here. See you tomorrow.